What's up, everybody? How's it going today on this, well, end of the year? 2019 is almost over. Hope everybody had a great holiday, whatever you may celebrate. I haven't made a video in a few days. I've been doing the family stuff that we do, and watching movies with the kids, hanging out with the extended and nuclear family, and just making the most of the season, and looking back and reflecting on the past 10 years, I just wanted to share a few thoughts on some of the crazy shit we went through in the 2010s. It was a great decade, and it was a horrible decade. It really doesn't matter. Every decade people either love it or hate it, depending on your circumstances in your life. No matter how bad things are going in the world, if a person, had a great year for themselves, that's how they're going to view it, and that's perspective. And so really all we can do is kind of reflect the angst of the entirety of society through the lens of the internet. And so I guess I'll start there, the internet. The internet really exploded in the 2010s, and it wasn't just the internet itself, but rather social media sites, which finally allowed people to express themselves, to discuss, things that they may not even discuss in public, or to say things to others under the guise of, an anonymous screen name or something because you don't like what they're saying. Trolls came out of the woodwork, and people started trying to figure out how to deal with the influx of hate on certain websites and how others just, Facebook, for example. I used Facebook for a few years, obviously, on and off, but I deleted it at least twice, and then finally deleted it permanently about a year and a half ago, and I haven't missed it. The only time I've missed it is when I actually need to sign up for an event or get notifications because everybody else uses it. And that's the problem with the getting wrapped up with not just internets and websites, but it's kind of like when I was younger and I was starting my business and I realized you have to have a bank. You want to rent a car, you have to have a credit card of some sort to put it, as a deposit, and therefore you're basically forced into this credit-based society. And instead of being rated on a number, your credit score number, we're kind of rated on like almost a social number now. Like China has their own social, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. I just figure this is a big issue over the last decade, has been social media. Memes were, I think it was Richard Dawkins that coined the term meme back in the 70s or 80s, but never could we have even guessed where it would go. I mean, most of the internet memes I see are, in my opinion, stupid. I don't like memes. I don't think that they're very funny for the most part. I mean, I'd say maybe 1 in 5 is like, gives me a little laugh. But I have my own sense of humor, so I'm not saying that memes are a bad thing. I find most of them to be abhorrently stupid and lazy. So therefore, there are a few that will shine through. We had all kinds of strange games. Pokemon Go, I mean, just that alone was just one of those moments in the 2010s. Was a what the fuck moment. And I guess I don't want to spend too much time on the internet factor, even though that was one of the main components of the 2010s. Movie reboots. What happened? I mean, when I look back in the old, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, I remember movies like, The Predator, or Predator, and some of the really, really intense action flicks, which some of them sucked, of course, too. But there was soul in it, kind of like the music. And then something happened after 2000. Selling out became so much more desirable for many bands and movie industries, companies, television shows, whatever it may be. And I think a lot of that had to do with catering to China. Like the big joke with the Avengers, when I talk about reboots, it's like, great, Disney bought Star Wars, great, what are we going to do now? Now they're going to make 1,000 Star Wars movies. Well, so be it. For them it's all about profit. It's not about quality. And so these movies are just the same old crap repeated over and over and over, which most people say, well, that's just how movies are, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's almost like as our society moves towards, theoretically towards a more intelligent society, we're actually dumbing ourselves down with the bullshit that we watch. But, that's just my opinion on it. I haven't seen very many good movies compared to how many come out in a long time. And the same thing with music. I'm not saying there's not good music. There is so much good music out there. What happened is, now that anyone can produce a movie and anyone can make an album, there's no real effort that has to go into going to a studio and paying, money and making sure you like the song. Basically, everything that anybody makes is put out there, so it's a little harder to dig through to find the gems. That's all. And I feel the same way about people. Folks say they can't find any like-minded people. That's why I use YouTube. I don't know many people who think like I do, or I don't really know anybody who thinks the way I do, but I mean people who can kind of understand where I'm coming from, I guess. So what else do we have in the 2010s? Fitbits. Calorie counting watches. What a stupid idea. That's my opinion. And most of these things to me are just, and I think most of the wearers and users of them are finally figuring that out, that looking at a digital readout of a bunch of numbers and heart rates means nothing to the average person. And people become obsessive about counting calories and steps. I mean, sometimes you just got to step back and say, let's use common sense here. I need to walk a little bit. I need to do a little exercise. Trying to assume that these little numbers on this readout are going to help tell you, what you should be doing to improve your health. I don't know. That's up to the individual. To me, it's like reading a horoscope. Make what you will out of it. But then we have along the lines of the Fitbit, or of course the people who are wearing them are also wearing what they called athleisure, which I'm not going to spend any time on that. It's just a word that came to mind, and I remember somebody talking about how, athletic leisure suits being worn as clothes. I don't care what people wear. I just thought it was kind of funny that people actually have to name these little, trends. I'm not a trend follower. I can't stand when everybody just jumps on the bandwagon because somebody's doing something or wearing something, or, this famous rapper's wearing this, so I'm going to wear this. It's like, I don't really buy into the hero society, but I understand that people need those to look up to. But when we're looking up to them for some gold chains or fucking, clothing style, it's just, I don't know. It just shows kind of a desperation. We're all looking to try to fit in. And for me as an individual, I try my hardest not to fit in because I like to be myself. I shouldn't say I try. It just is who I am. I don't make the effort to, follow trends, which makes me the outcast, right? And I'm cool with that. And I understand why a lot of folks do jump on trends, because it helps them fit in and have a community. And that's really the ultimate reason why we do anything that other people do. It's so we can have a conversation or an understanding based on something that we both agree on. And so let's move on. What other weird things came out of the 2010s besides social media and movies and all that crap? Well, we've got CBD. CBD became this big catch-all term for any health problem you have, you can take CBD. And as a 30-year cannabis advocate, I completely support CBD strains. I grew CBD strains cannabis for years, and I just don't think that it's being marketed properly. The amounts that are being sold, it's being sold in water and lotions, and I just think it's a big marketing scam for the most part. But I've got plenty of discussions on that elsewhere. I won't go into detail. Cleansing teas were a huge thing. Even this little pearl I heard about, what were they, jade pearls? You're supposed to stick it in your vagina and it helps to cleanse your blood and everything else. Like, people are still sticking things in their body because somebody tells them that it's going to, cure what ails them. It's like, when are we going to learn to use common sense on these things? But there's so much new information coming out that it's hard for people to know what's true and what's not. Like Kratom, for example. Kratom was a huge thing in the 2010s, and it still is. And I discovered Kratom in 2009. So I think I became a vendor in 2015, I think. And I've watched this market just go crazy, with people making, claims about what it can or can't do. Some companies getting sued, the FDA trying to shut down everything. But we pulled through, and I think it's finally quieting down a little bit to where people are going to be able to hang on to their herb. But there was so much. I used that, brought Kratom up because there were so many things I thought I knew at the beginning that I learned were different as the years went on. It's like, oh, this is what the growers are saying, and oh, this is how it's dried, and oh, this is different strain colors don't mean as much as you might think they do. That was just my own exposure to one element that came out, one of the herbs or new, substances that became popular in the 2010. We've got things like vitamin water. I mean, to me, it's dumb enough that people buy bottled water to start. And the fact that somebody would even buy a bottle of water, say Fiji water, that was actually, pumped out in Fiji and shipped all the way across the ocean to here, where there's people in Fiji who actually don't have adequate drinking water. I just think it's absurd. I mean, the bottled water industry they just make so much money, it's ridiculous. But when you start adding vitamins and making coconut water and vitamin water, you can make all these purported health benefits, which, I don't know. I won't say that they do or they are or are not healthy, but I'll just put it this way. When your water says it's fancy water, it's probably just water. Cleansing teas were the same way. Nootropics or nootropics, I was into that for a while, and I actually still believe in them. So I'm not going to say that they were a bad thing. Or it's basically a concoction or collection of herbs in a capsule or a pill that you can take, which is supposed to increase your thinking power. And there are plenty of. We know that lion's mane, for example, can help rebuild neural connections, neural tissue in the brain. And as new science comes out, we discover all these different drugs or plants that can actually help us with these things. But then we learn that maybe it's not what we thought it was. And so it's really important that we're cautious as to thinking we've found some magic cure. And more importantly, when we're taking something to increase brain power, we have to realize that it might be short-lived, or it may have detrimental effects long-term, and we just don't know yet. Microdosing was a huge thing in the 2010s, and I don't want to spend too much time on that because I'd like to do a future video on this, but microdosing is taking sub-psychoactive doses of LSD or psilocybin mushrooms, which some people say it really immensely helps their mood, but people also say that taking sugar pill helps their mood. So it's really hard to know what the effects actually are in this realm, and I think it's very subjective to each person. But my personal experience with psychedelics is I prefer to take one large dose because I believe that it's the memory of the event and that thought of, wow, I had that experience that actually helps you to kind of let go. And it's the long-term antidepressant effects, in my opinion. They're not from the substance itself, but rather how your brain processes. So what else do we have in the 2010s? I know this is totally random, and I have just all these different ideas that I wanted to share, but they're don't seem very organized. But fecal transplants are a big thing now. That one's amazing, and I actually am surprised. A lot of people haven't heard about this yet, but yes, you can actually help to improve your health if you're, say, overweight or you're lacking certain gut bacteria by a fecal transplant. Pretty disgusting, but it's pretty amazing too at the same time. Because in the 2010s, we learned a lot more about the microbiome and how the foods that we eat affect, and how our digestion in the gut and producing serotonin and dopamine, it's not just a mind thing. Our entire bodies are connected through that vagus nerve. Beards were big in the 2010s. Unfortunately, see, I've always been a beard guy. I never grew a beard because of somebody else did. But most guys who you ask will say they would like to grow a beard if they can. But for a lot of guys, it's just a nuisance and they don't want one. But there was this entire hipster crowd through the 2010s that have these perfectly manicured beards with beard wax and everything. And, people who spend more time on their beards than women spend on their hair. I just found it kind of humorous. 2010s, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. That one showed itself. It showed its own colors. I mean, anything that volatile to jump from $1 to $17,000, then back to $7,000, to me that's way too volatile to invest in. So I'm not a cryptocurrency person at this point. Jobs changed in the 2010s. Just a decade ago. Jobs, man. I mean, kids who are graduating high school would look forward to trying to find a career, and with the tech industry, this whole thing has changed with automation, robots, pretty soon self-driving cars and everything else. And that's a big one because it's making it hard for a younger generation to find what they want to do with their lives, which generally changes over time anyway. But people are starting to lose hope, and that's unfortunate. Music industry and the movie industry also changed with streaming and how musicians and actors and movie industry made money. It's kind of like you either get left behind or you go forward with the times. And it was kind of like the Napster, before the 2010s was what started all this. And everybody has to adjust the way they do business in this world. The way that they talk to one another, the way that they think. It's like we're starting to realize more about ourselves. And that's making it difficult for people to process, myself included. What kind of conspiracies, did we come out of the 2010s? It's the same old crap except for the anti-vaxxers. The anti-vaxxer crowd is just, to me, just a thorn in the side of society, trying to pick out, one or two cases and saying, look, this killed this kid. Oh, meanwhile, millions of people are living disease-free. And I was watching, you might have seen, there's a really good show right now. It's called Togo. I think it's on Disney. And it was the story of Togo, the dog who ran in 1920s when they had a huge diphtheria outbreak in Nome, Alaska. And they made these rounds, all these dog sled teams, to bring the medicine back so all the kids wouldn't die in town. And I just thought, today you just get a DPT shot. And for people to say, oh, this shot might make my kid sick, or, without any real, 1 in 100,000 cases maybe have an adverse reaction, maybe even less. But that's not the point. The point is, if you get diphtheria, you're going to get sick and you could die. So, can only spend so much time on the anti-vax thing, but I think it's just preposterous and people need to really rethink statistics instead of, selecting a few kids who had an adverse reaction and ignoring the millions of lives that it saves every year. Just whatever. And that goes along with science denial, which actually is a huge thing in the 2000s. Science denial, the very term itself. Science is not perfect. It is far from perfect. All it is a method for gathering information about our world in a way that we can actually see, observe, and generally do experiments on, and repeated experiments. You have a theory, you try an experiment, you repeat it, you document it. But there are folks who are denying and ignoring, the people in our society who have dedicated their lives to one cause or another. Say, I'm going to learn about geology, or I'm going to be an astronomer. And these people come forward and say, look, we have this new discovery. And then these entire crowds of conspiracy people are like, no, this is all a lie. You're paid by NASA. And it's like these are individuals that spend their lives dedicated to these. You can see it in their eyes. But nope, it's just denial, flat denial of science. And this comes from religion more often than not. Most of the people who are strong science deniers are religious. And I'm not saying that religion is the problem, but it's definitely going to be a problem if people are more willing to believe a 2,000-year-old book than a study they can see in front of their face. And I think that hopefully that'll change over time. For some reason, flat earthers became a big thing in the 2010s. I think that goes back to what I said about community and finding people who think like you do. No, the earth is not flat. I'm not even going to argue it. It's completely pointless because of all the information I've gathered on my own side. I haven't been out to space, right? So what's the point in even arguing it? Just look at the types of people who are saying the earth is flat, and that should tell you what you need to know. And hopefully you don't take that offensively if you're a flat earth believer. What I mean is look to the people you're watching who are telling you this. Look at the video makers who are making putting this dun 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 background music and all these intense graphics to try to convince you of something. Why? Doesn't even matter. It has nothing to do with the earth. If you go to a flat earth conference, I've seen a couple on documentaries, the people are nice. They're kind. They care about each other. They're there to have a good time. They care more about having a good time than actually proving to anyone else the earth is flat, because that issue really doesn't matter to them. It doesn't. You're still living on the planet. What's the point? Community. It's always about community. And this is why these groups form. And unfortunately, this surrounds the ideas like the New World Order. I heard about this back in the early 90s, and I read about it for years. And, it's easier to believe that somebody's in charge of the planet and everything that happens on it than to believe that, holy shit, we're flying in a rock through space and we don't know what's going on, because that's the reality. Also, towards the middle of the 2010s, PC culture, being politically correct. That's an issue that each one of us has to decide for ourselves. I at first understood and respected the desire for us to leave out certain, objective terms in our vernacular, to start abandoning hate speech, if you want to call it that, or, talking down on others, racism, misogyny, all of that. Sure, we need to get rid of it. But trying to ban speech or tell people what they can and can't say doesn't solve the problem. And that's what we're learning now. We have to, just because a person doesn't say something doesn't mean they don't think it. The idea is to get to the root of the problem, not to just keep people quiet. It's the old see no, hear no, smell no evil, right? The Facebook data breach, like I was saying earlier, that kind of stuff, data was a huge issue. And in 2010, privacy became an issue. Everything you do and buy, you're using cards for, you're using your store cards, whatever grocery store you shop at, your club cards, things like that. Shopping online, every single thing you buy and do is documented. And now is sitting on a server or servers, which is basically the story of your purchase life. And that's why I said before I pay cash for everything and I don't use club cards. Just to make it a little bit, just to give myself a little bit more peace of mind for what it's worth. But it really doesn't matter. Because now everyone's putting willingly things like these Ring systems. I mean, I'm sure at least one of you out there probably got a Ring doorbell for Christmas, or have a home security system which is connected to the internet, or have locks that are done remotely through your phone, or remote lights, or one of the worst, in my opinion, is having a giant microphone in the middle of your living room, just so you don't have to type something in. Alexa! To each his own. Maybe a person likes the convenience, but for me, just the idea that hackers can hack into microphones and cameras in your house, no thank you. No thank you. I'll leave that one behind. I feel secure enough. Also in the 2010s, Amazon and consolidation was a huge issue. Not just Amazon, but many companies. A lot of social media networks and cable companies merging into these huge monstrosities, which basically dominate the market. And this is what's happened with phone, like Verizon, and, cable companies like Comcast or Xfinity, whatever they call themselves. You're tied into it. You're forced into it because they own the phone lines, they own the cell towers, they own the cables. And so now that this has become a public necessity to have these things, we have to create new systems and new laws which protect the consumer. Because if we're going to be forced to live using these tools, just like using banks, they have to be accessible to everyone. The last thing I'm going to mention, besides self-driving cars and SpaceX and all this technology we have, I don't want to go into detail on that, but the people media. One thing that did happen in the 2010s is the media died. Okay, cable news is dead. Sure, there are plenty of people who still watch it, but they are desperately clinging for survival. And local newspapers and national newspapers are also barely clinging for survival. The Oregonian, in Oregon here, they have, I guess, one of the oldest papers in the country, and they had to cut down considerably over the years, but they have 100 years of history of media, and they're not out there for shock value. It's a local paper, a state paper. It's always been a great paper, but people don't read papers anymore. They go online. So what that means is that we're constantly questioning what we're reading online as to where's the source, who wrote the story, and what we've learned is that basically any newscast you see, whatever network it be, Fox, NBC, they're going to read almost verbatim, and sometimes it is literally verbatim when you read an article from the Associated Press, because the Associated Press has millions of people around the world donating information and doing stories, and they are basically the go-to for all the other networks. And it turns out they're just as biased and fucked up as everyone else. I actually respected AP for a long time until I realized how much they're omitting from the media. It's not often about what the media is saying. It's about what they're not saying. Nobody's talking about the wars anymore. Nobody's talking about the tyranny, that's being committed throughout the world. And if they do, it's just in passing, because maybe a soldier died. Only if it's a U.S. soldier. This idea that the U.S. is some superpower and we're going to be the champions of the world, I think that this is falling by the wayside. And as the media has failed us, the people's media has come forward. This is a seriously complex issue, because at first I said, yes, people stopped watching media, and now they're going to start listening to each other, and we can be the media and the stories. And then you find out that these guys on YouTube, they say, well, shit, if I make this story up and it sounds good, I'll get a lot more views. And a lot more views equals a lot more ad revenue. And so they make up these crazy stories and say things that will get, so the story will get spread. Then they get docked their ad revenue, and then they start complaining about censorship. Oh, Google's trying to censor what I have to say. It's like, for the most part, you can say what you want up to a certain point. It's more about the money. And that's what I'm saying, is that the money becomes more important than the news or the information. This was what happened with mainstream media, and this is exactly what's happening with alternative media. These places like Natural News, this is one of the worst websites I have ever seen in my life. It is one of the most misinformational, delusional, and completely negative, and, sinking your teeth into everything that's wrong with society. And then at the end of the webpage, they'll sell you their products. Well, buy our pills, buy our special stuff. This is good. Everybody else's sucks, but we can sell you good products. And it's all about the money. It's always about the money. It's the Alex Jones syndrome, Scream and rant and rave, and people will go, yeah, and get behind you, but really they don't do any fact checking and don't care. So that's all I've got for the 2010s. It's turned into a longer video than I intended, but I got a lot of thoughts on my mind. I thought I would finish up by how the 2010s changed me personally. It's a lot happened. I've been with my wife for 21 years as of this New Year's Eve, and because we did our first date was on New Year's of 1998. But we never got married until, the 2010s. So when we got married, it was like, I figured I should include that within my decade. Getting married, having kids, 2 kids who were actually we have an older one who's 25, and then the youngest is 10, and then a 7-year-old. But he was born in 2009, my 10-year-old. But, so from 2010 on, I had babies, and was dealing with all of that at the same time. I suffered an extreme sciatic pain episode for on and off through those years in my late 30s, and got to the point where I had to quit my career as a carpenter. I just couldn't lift my own tools or do my own work anymore. And it was pretty depressing. I didn't realize until recently that it was kind of like losing someone, losing, a relationship with something I know how to do, that I'm good at, and that I enjoy doing. And eventually that forced me into starting my home herbal business, which I have with Carpo's Botanicals. And so I'm ready to move on from that too, because I like to get my hands dirty. I like to get out there and do stuff, and it's really hard when you have back pain. So suffering pain, chronic pain, for me was a huge thing in the 2010s. And it taught me a lot of humility. Also, in the early 2010s, I went through my kind of occult and New Age phase, where I was just obsessed with knowledge, like, the secrets of the universe and the holographic universe, and a lot of very, let's just say, off the beaten path type books, like occult knowledge, things like Manly P. Hall and whatnot. And I went through this kind of love and light phase, like 8 years ago or something, maybe less, where I was one of those people who was trying to just always be positive, because I had heard, well, if you act positive, it'll come your way. And at one point I realized this is just ridiculous. Nobody can act positive all the time. It's stupid. It makes no sense. It's not human nature. So I abandoned that. I'm generally a positive person still. It's just that I don't pretend to hold back emotions. If I'm pissed at somebody, I will let you fucking know. Let's put it that way. That's how I let go. You find out that if you try to say love and light and everything's cool, I don't want any conflict or anything, then you're going to hold those thoughts in and it's going to drive you insane. You got to say what you mean. I also learned a lot of patience on YouTube with, up close to 4,000 videos over 10 years now. I have learned so much about people and myself. When I first started YouTube, man, I would bite on every trolling line. I mean, I don't like it when people talk, say mean things or they're harsh to me. Nobody does. But do you have to react to a stranger on the internet? Well, I did at the beginning, but often I would try to explain myself and found that in the end, people don't want explanations, they just want to argue. So I've learned to pick those people out and just don't even give them the time of day. And that means I also learned how to move on and not dwell on things. Stress was a huge issue for me in my 30s. Like butterflies on my stomach, anxiety, stressed out, twitching, and then I just let go. I had to let go. It's like I would rather not stress about anything than stress about everything, right? And I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. And it's something a lot of folks go through in their 30s, especially when you're past that youthful excitement and you're looking towards your future saying, what do I want to do with it? What should I do with my life, my career? Do I want a family? Have I made mistakes in my life? Can I fix them? Those things. And you just got to let all that go. You just got to say, I am here today. From here on, I'm moving forward. You'll remember the past. You don't have to consciously dwell on it. That's all. I also bought a school bus. That was a big thing that happened. It was a year and a half ago there. But buying a school bus is something I've always wanted since I was a kid. And remodeled it into a nice RV, custom made the way I wanted it. So I could use my carpentry skills still to do something. At least those skills never go away. Even if I can't work as a career, I can fix my own house if I get around to it. They say that the carpenter's house is always falling apart and the plumber's toilet is always clogged. It's just one of those things. Because you don't want to take your work home with you, right? What else? What are the last couple of things? I think one of the most interesting things to me is I'm a person who likes to change a lot. I don't like to change, I just do. Change ideas, what I'm interested in. One day I just want to write, the next day I want to do something else, and then there's a day where I'm like, how did I have the motivation to do this back then? And then it comes again, it just comes in these waves, and I've learned to ride the waves, the ebb and flow of the tides of motivation, happiness, excitement, and really try to bring that to a happy balance, a happy medium. But the fact that I've stuck with YouTube for this long, it's really revealing to me. It means there's a part of me that actually really is getting something out of this, because even though I don't make any money on YouTube, after all this time, I still enjoy doing it. And while I'm saying that, to the few patrons I do have, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it, more than you know. I grew my hair out. I haven't had long hair since I was 18. I cut it all off when I was 20 because it was just getting annoying. And I thought, well, sometime in my life I'd like to grow it out again. So I did. I also started going to Soak, which is the regional Burning Man, about 10 years ago. And I fell in love with electronic dance music, or EDM. I love getting up there and just moving, with some heavy bass lines and some great tribal, music. I just never thought I would fall in love with that stuff the way I did, but you get a few experiences in, and it's just it's something that's just part of you. So I like dancing. I never danced before, except for at dead shows. The last couple things, I've learned a couple things, and one is that experience is everything, okay? That is my opinion, of course. That when we talk about what's important in life, whether a person's trying to find their truth, find their reality, get to heaven, whatever it might be, what really matters is your experience right now, and making the best experience, regardless of what you believe or don't believe. This is what matters right now. It's all that matters, which is to accept myself for who I am as a human. And it's funny because I said right now, because I actually, before I made this, was going to make kind of a tribute to Ram Dass, which this